everybody, welcome to the Vinyl Fetish Club. Here we are up in the Vinyl Attic again to take on another one of our 101 albums that must be in your collection. These are the must-haves in your vinyl collection, and today we're really tackling an ultimate favorite of mine, David Bowie's 1976 Station to Station. Came out at the beginning of 1976. There's so many great Bowie albums to choose from, so many of them, you know, Ziggy Stardust and Heroes and just so many of the greats. I have a soft spot for Black Tie, White Noise, which I've never actually seen on vinyl. If it exists, please let me know. It's one of my favorites. But we're doing Station to Station. And Station to Station for a couple reasons. Station to Station is kind of seen as a transition record when he was leaving his kind of blue-eyed soul period of Young Americans and the work that he did with John Lennon, and before he went off to Berlin with Iggy Pop to do the Berlin trilogy that included, of course, Heroes and Low and the Lodger album. It's kind of an in-between one, but one of the reasons I love this album is because of its sort of multiple layers of what the hell is going on in this record. And I have to tell you, as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old in the winter of 75, 76, when the Golden Years single came out, to hear that song on the radio, it was like nothing else in the world. I only remember them playing at night. I don't remember hearing Golden Days at the daytime. I just remember listening to my stereo headphones and hearing Golden Years come on and thinking, what is this? This is that guy from Mars, right? So I want to talk about this album and why it's important, why it should be in your collection. It was a record where he was sort of moving his base of operations to Los Angeles, and he was recording in Los Angeles, and he was in the middle of a serious cocaine habit binge. This is sometimes seen as the cocaine album, which is not a good thing. I'm not recommending it. It's the devil's drug. I've never done it, but I've seen a lot of people go down because of it. But cocaine plays a certain factor into this album, including some of the themes on the record. He had just done the movie The Man Who Fell to Earth. The cover is actually a picture of The Man Who Fell to Earth. By the way, I bought this copy at Wuxtree Records in Atlanta in 1980. It's a pretty crappy vinyl promo copy of the album, but it works fine because the vinyl is the way to hear it. There's some pretty good remasterings of it that have come out since then on CD, and the Spotify version, which we'll include in the link, is pretty damn good, but this vinyl version is near and dear to my heart. The first Bowie album I ever owned. I think Changes One was the one I got after this one. Golden Years had been released as a single pre-Christmas in late November 1975, and then this album came out in January of 1976. He was still kind of riding high on the soul vibe of Young Americans, which launched the career of none other than Luther Vandross, who's one of the background singers. And so he went on Soul Train, the great dance show that we always watch after American Bandstand. American Bandstand would come on Saturday morning and Saturday afternoons. You get Soul Train, you'd really learn how to dance. It was a black dance show with Don Cornelius. And he went and performed lip-synced Golden Years on Soul Train and was so out of it. I mean, you can watch the videos, and I'll include also the link to the YouTube of him on Soul Train. He's just incoherent. He's so coked up. But performing this great soulful song. Is it dance? Is it avant-garde? Like, what is this song? And you can kind of tell the dancers on Soul Train trying to figure out, how do I dance to this? What is this music? Who is this weird guy with this orange hair? But it really kind of opened the door for this album. This album is expansive in many ways. I mean, first of all, he's bringing on board his band, which is including Carlos Alomar and Earl Slick on guitars, and those guys are creating a soundscape. And this is before he sort of gets to work on the Eno stuff, but he's really influenced by krautrock and the stuff that's coming out of Germany, including Can and Kraftwerk and groups like Tangerine Dream, and just sort of the weird, expansive avant-garde music that's happening in the 70s. So Alomar and Slick are creating these sonic soundscapes that become sort of associated with Bowie in the second half of the 70s. Earl Slick went on. Earl Slick, in 1980 worked with John Lennon on the Double Fantasy sessions. I met Earl Slick in 82, I think, 81 or 82, when he was in a band called Silver Condor. It's one crappy record that they put out. I went to an album release party and got to meet the great Earl Slick, and he just talked about how much fun it was to work with Bowie. I imagine. But the songs are long. I mean, it opens up with this over 10-minute epic called Station to Station, which is this chugging, and introduces the Thin White Duke as sort of the new caricature in Bowie's long line of personas that he's playing. The European Man is here, and is just sort of fueled and kind of like a mini rock opera. It just goes on and on and on, and then you get into the Golden Years track, and then you have the next track was, also cocaine inspired, as supposedly most of these songs were. That was kind of his God song. Word on the Wing was just sort of his, kind of wondering what the hell is my life all about, and it's just deeply emotional. And you listen to it after all these years, and you think how hard he was searching, how hard he was lost with all this fame, and singing to the sweet thing, come into my life. It's almost like a come to God moment from Bowie. And then you flip it over to side 2, because there's only 3 songs on each side, because they're just these sort of epic pieces, and you get TVC 1-5, which is kind of like a prototypical new wave song when it came out. It really set up bands like the Talking Heads and stuff that was more dancey. But it was supposedly about a cocaine binge that he and Iggy Pop were on, where he thought the television was eating his girlfriend, that there was a hologram coming out of the television set to eat his girlfriend. And that's that song. And then Stay. Stay is just another great, I don't even know if you would call it a ballad, but it's just sort of this, these guitars, this interplay. I mean, you really have to listen to it on stereo and vinyl and hear the sound of Earl Slick and Carlos Alomar just bouncing off of each other in this weird creation of a universe that Bowie then fills in. And then the song ends with Wild as the Wind, which is made popular by Nina Simone, a great jazz singer, and then of course he inhabits as his own embodiment of the Thin White Duke. There's just so much going on in this record. It never loses any of its value over the years. It never sounds dated. I mean, sometimes I'll have to say Let's Dance, kind of comes and goes, whether or not it still sounds current. But this record, I just listened to it last night. I went to sleep listening to it again and just thought, what world has Bowie created? And then he pivots and he goes to Berlin and creates this trilogy of these Eno-esque records where he's, making records with Iggy Pop in Berlin and is in a whole different direction. So there's this one moment where he's between soul and Eno that he creates this explosion of sound, of which the high point, of course, is Golden Years. During this period, he made some kind of comments that were problematic at best. He was flirting with images of fascism, with being sort of this European Superman. He had made a comment the year before that Adolf Hitler was the best rock star of all because he galvanized a whole nation, and was playing with a lot of these sort of fascist images, of which probably the Thin White Duke is the clearest example. So the question then came out, is Bowie a fascist? Is David Bowie a fascist? And I want to take a little bit of time to back away from that. First of all, we all do things when we're young and stupid. I'm not talking about Eric Clapton. He's still doing stupid things. But, a lot of people have made mistakes when you're young. I hope I'm not judged by who I was in my 20s. But when you are speedballing cocaine every single day, you're going to say a lot of really stupid things. So I think a lot of that was coming out of his sort of cocaine haze. And then later he had to back up or sort of back away from those comments and say, it wasn't fascism per se or Nazism. He had been apparently intrigued by the fact that the Nazis had been in England looking for the Holy Grail, and he was interested in the occult mysticism, not the anti-Semitism, and a lot of his Jewish friends had to come out and defend Bowie as not a Nazi But there was this moment where he was kind of caught up in this rebel moment. And I would like to also remind people that when the Sex Pistols came out, Sid Vicious wore a shirt with a swastika on it. Was Sid Vicious a Nazi, or was he just trying to provoke and get a reaction? So even though now in the 21st century, in the 2020s, we're a little bit more woke to the power and the traumatizing power of those ideas and symbols and words, in the 70s, they were just sort of throwing everything against the wall to see what sticks. But I wanted to use this moment as we're trying to do a little bit of sociology in each of these album reviews to talk a little bit about what it means when we say someone or something is fascist. Because that word gets thrown around a lot. I live in Portland, Oregon, land of Antifa, the anti-fascist. I think everybody should be anti-fascist. If you're not Antifa, I worry about you. That means you're pro-fa. If you're pro-fa, we got a problem. So let's just take a moment to talk about some of the elements of fascism and see where Bowie is not that. So one of the things about fascism is it's intently nationalistic, nation overall. Germany über alles, right? Deutschland über alles. And when this record came out, Bowie had expressed a certain amount of admiration and love for the British Prime Minister, so that could be taken as nationalism. The British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, was a Labour Party guy, not exactly right-wing, like they're the left-wing party in Britain, so we can strike that one out. But nationalism and fascism tend to go hand in hand. We'll remember a certain president named Donald Trump that said, "What's wrong with nationalism?" And I think he wasn't smart enough to know the difference between nationalism and patriotism. And similarly, fascism is sort of the opposite of communism, so there's a strong brand of anti-communism and fascism, and we never really got any sentiment that Bowie was anti-left-wing or anti-communist. That never came out in any of his rhetoric. There's also a lot of racism and anti-Semitism in fascism, so that would be odd for someone who had debuted this album on a show called Soul Train, who had made a record rooted in Blue-Eyed Soul, that was the Young Americans album, and had championed black music. It would be hard pressed, and then was later married to a woman from Africa, Iman. Not that white people are immune from racism when they have black friends, but it was never part of his overt messages in any of his music, any of it at all. Fascism is also noted by a call to tradition, to the old ways, to make Germany great again, and a rejection of modernity. If anything characterizes Bowie's career, it is modernity and post-modernity, moving forward, leaving the old conventions behind, breaking the mold, saying the past and the traditions of the past need to be left in the past. You can be fascinated with them, but in no way did he ever express any desire to return to something in the past. In fact, people like him in the past were burned at the stake, so I don't think he was trying to move culture backwards in any way, but moving it forward in a super modern type of way, and then ultimately postmodern, all the way up to Black Star, his last album, when he's commenting on his death as he's dying. And then one of the key elements, among the many key elements of fascism, is a hypermasculinity. It's the Superman who is, using violence to solve the problems, and the women are in the home having Aryan babies, and the men are in charge of everything. I mean, that's a thing that sort of drove Germany in the wake of its defeat in the First World War, was this need to reclaim its old school masculinity, and did so through Nazism. If you want to use Bowie as an example of hypermasculinity, you're going to have to redefine what masculinity is. Bowie was seen as they called them in the 70s, AC/DC, bisexual, and feminine, and wearing makeup and hair dye and having relationships with men. Allegedly, people like Mick Jagger having all these sort of homosexual type relationships, and so that hypermasculinity is sort of right out the window with regards to Bowie. So in many ways, Bowie is the opposite of fascism. Not the perfect opposite of fascism, because he still is a white empowered male that can benefit from flirting with these kind of fascist images of being the thin white duke and the return of the European man. But it really doesn't have anything to do with fascism. That was people sort of taking a couple inopportune comments that he made and turning them into something else. So this album, you know, even if you're hardcore Antifa, what I'm saying is, even if you're hardcore Antifa, you you can love this album. You can really kind of get into the spaciness of The Man Who Fell to Earth. He was actually, instead of doing this album, was going to do a soundtrack to The Man Who Fell to Earth, and it kind of fell apart, and so it just ended up being this record, and we're so lucky that it did. It's just, oh my God, it's just so, there's nothing else like it. There's no Bowie album like it, let alone any other album like it. It is one of a kind. It was a one-shot deal, and should be in your collection. All right, that's a little bit about Bowie and fascism. Next week, we're going to take on a really great double punk rock album by the Minutemen, Double Nickels on the Dime. It's one of my favorite double albums of all time. We're going to do the Minutemen next week as we move through our second 10 albums of our 100 great albums that matter. You know what I'm going to say. This album, Bowie matters. We miss him every day. Station to station matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.